Hi, and welcome to today's Oxford Centre for Personalised Medicine flash interview vlog, where we talk to different people involved in the field of personalised medicine about their life, work and experiences. Today, we're joined by Dr. Sarah Wynn, the CEO of Unique. Hi, Sarah. So it's great to be chatting to you today. Could you begin by telling the audience a bit more about yourself and your background?
Hi, thanks, Catherine, for inviting me to be here. I'm really delighted. So I started off my professional background as a scientist. So I have a PhD in genetics, where I actually spent 3 years sequencing 3 genes, which now feels a bit depressing given how fast you can do it. But I started off looking at, I was interested in Down syndrome and the genes on chromosome 21 that might contribute to the phenotype. And so I was doing some work, molecular biology work around looking at those genes in mice to try to get a better understanding of Down syndrome. And I then spent several years working as a postdoc in London and also in Hong Kong. And it wasn't until I had my second child that I moved from the lab and academia into the world of patient support. And that really came about because we had a genetic condition diagnosed in my family. So when we came to have children, we had lots of miscarriages. And then once you have 3 miscarriages, there's a sort of battery of tests that go on. And we discovered that my husband carried a balanced translocation. And as a geneticist, it was, I think, sort of bizarre that we then got bombarded with this sort of genetic condition that impacted our personal life. And so we joined Unique, the organisation I'm now a CEO of, as a family member looking for more information on his particular genetic condition and a balanced translocation. And then several years later, after I had my second child, I decided to work for Unique as a staff member.
Excellent. So question that I ask all of my guests then, what does the term personalised medicine mean to you?
So I think actually it's quite context dependent, because if I'm thinking without my Unique hat on, personalised medicine feels to me that it's about drugs and treatment. But actually, when I'm thinking about it in context of Unique and our families and members, I think of it more as sort of one stage back. And I think about it more in terms of diagnostics and predicting all of that sort of way. Whereas I think that most people would think about it in terms of personalized drug interventions based on a person's particular genetic makeup. But I think for our families, where there are very rarely treatments or drugs available for their conditions, I think where it's really played a role is in giving families an accurate diagnosis for their child.
So Unique then, tell me a bit more about it. What is it that you do as a charity? Why do you think it's such important work to do?
So Unique started life a long time ago, actually in 1984 by Edna Knight. And she had several of her children were diagnosed with an extra bit of chromosome 9, trisomy 9p. And she wanted to meet other families who have had a child with a similar condition to try to learn more about it. Because I think one of the challenges with rare diseases is not only have you never heard of it, but no one around you ever has. So you're in this sort of lost, isolated world. And so she managed to get in touch through her doctors. Actually, they put her in touch with some other families. And gradually she had a group of about 5 or 6 families who also had a child with this condition. And what they used to do, it was pre-internet, was they had this little red book and they would write their experiences of having children with this condition, and they would literally put it in the post and it would go around the houses. And I think this worked so effectively for them that a number of the doctors said, well, can other families join you? And she recognized that it wasn't just about this one condition, it was really about lots of families who'd also got rare chromosome diagnoses and were looking for support and connections and to sort of feel a bit less lost in getting this rare diagnosis. So she expanded to all rare chromosome disorders, and then it sort of has just gone on from there. And we've gone from those 5 or 6 families to having over 25,000 families. and they are from all over the world. So one of the things with rare conditions is if you're looking for family matches, it's sort of no good having geographical borders. You don't know where the other person with your rare condition might be. So we have families from 110 different countries, and we're open to anyone coming from anywhere. And we've also expanded from being just rare chromosome disorders to actually being rare genetic disorders, because I think as technology's changed, and this is really where personalized medicine really comes to the fore, and technology has changed so rapidly and has really changed that diagnostic process for families. It became clear from projects like the DDD project and the 100,000 genome project that came afterwards, that these families who were getting these single gene conditions didn't have anywhere to go for support and information. So we never want to turn anyone away. We're a family support group, and so we want to be able to provide support for everybody that needs it. And so we now take on genetic single gene disorders as well. Generally, if we can signpost someone elsewhere, then we don't take those families. But for example, the Down syndrome families have a really excellent organization of their own. But I think the boundaries of where we begin and end is a bit grey, because we're just really keen that everyone has a home to go to and can come to us for support. And I think one of the important things about what we do at Unique is that we're not just a support group, but we really recognise how important information is. And so we have a really big information project, an arm to what we provide, and we have an in-house team of scientists who have PhDs in genetics too, who write all of our information guides. And so we do this support and offer peer support and all of that side of things, but then also this information side of things, which I think actually ties up very nicely with personalized medicine, because I think for us, it really means you have the tying together the genetic diagnosis, these really intricate genetic diagnoses, with what that might mean in terms of phenotype and prognosis, and what families can expect might happen with their child going forward.
Brilliant. So do you also work with professionals? So what is it that you can offer professionals, and what can they do for Unique in return?
So I often think we sort of sit in the middle of this, and we're sort of a bridge between families and professionals. So I think one of the things that we realized early on at Unique was about coordination. And so partly because we offer we have this big information project, but actually we want there to be research into these conditions. We want to be able to support our families better by having accurate information. And so we work with professionals a lot. And so in a sort of symbiotic way. So we want things from them. So our professionals volunteer their time to review our information guides. Many clinicians have written our single gene information guides. We also have professionals volunteer to translate our guides into other languages. So we tap into their expertise a bit. But I think also our information project is really helpful for them. When they see a patient, they can download the guide. And we often hear that it's very helpful that they can, in the clinic, give this written information, which is written to be medically accurate, but sort of in general layman's terms and written in a family-friendly way. And it includes things that are not only the medical issues that accompany that diagnosis, but also all of those psychosocial issues, which actually parents want to know. And so they're very warm and family-friendly, but equally it's really important that they're medically accurate and up to date. So I think that combination is quite unusual in terms of patient information. And so I think we also provide a service for the professionals in terms of them being able to have information that they can rely on to hand to their families, and that they know that it will be helpful for the families as well.
And do you also interact and work with researchers?
Yes. So as I touched on before, I think when families join us, actually their first question is do you know anything about this condition, and do you have anyone else registered that you can put us in touch with? And I think for many families, the second question is there any research? And often there isn't any research, because as we know, getting research funded and underway for rare diseases is really tricky. So we're really keen to try to facilitate research projects where we can. And we get involved in several different ways. So we might be involved in the design of a research project and be a co-applicant. Or the other way that we work with researchers quite often is that we help them put together their information sheets for families, because we've got lots of experience in how to word things for families and make complex, often, complex scientific information digestible and meaningful for families. Or sometimes we just advertise projects and studies and research with our families on our social media platforms, or we can email relevant families. So we have an internal ethics committee, so we always make sure that the research we're getting involved with meets our guidelines and standards, and that we think it's beneficial for families. But as long as the research meets all of those criteria, then we're really happy to share it. One of the other things we always ask researchers to do is to provide a summary at the end of the study, because one of the things we know that families find difficult about taking part in research, and generally they're quite keen to take part in research, even when they know that it might not be of benefit to their child, but that sort of altruism and connection to their condition means they're quite keen on this idea. But we know from feedback that lots of families found it really a bit dispiriting that they would take part and then they would never hear what happened to the research. So one of the things we always ask the researchers we work with is to provide a sort of one-page layman summary of what the research found and what's happening to the research. And we find that families really appreciate that, and it makes them feel engaged and useful and that they've contributed, which is a good thing.
Brilliant. So if we bring the story back to personalised medicine then, so you've touched on this already, but how revolutionary is personalised medicine to the lives of the families and the patients you interact with? And what do you think that the patients themselves have to offer to the precision medicine field?
So I think it's been really revolutionary, as I said before, in our world, has really been in terms of diagnostics. So I think we had lots of families in the past, and we know generally in rare disease that there's this enormous length of time between sort of knowing that something might be wrong to getting a diagnosis, and the rapid change in technology and diagnosis has meant that gap between knowing something's wrong and getting a diagnosis has got much shorter. And I think hopefully with the new genomic medicine service and genome sequencing that will get even shorter. I think one of the things that we hear a lot at Unique is how families have battled to get a diagnosis. They've been to the GP lots of times, they've asked for referrals, they've talked to the pediatrician, and that idea that it's a real battle and effort to get a diagnosis is frankly wrong, and we would hope that would get better. And I think hopefully personalized medicine and that just general idea that there is a way to get a diagnosis for these children and that genome sequencing can offer it for lots of families, hopefully that's already changed lots of people's lives, and I think will continue to do that. I think one of the difficulties though now, particularly for our families in rare disease, is that I think we're really good at the diagnostic bit. I think the next challenge is going to be how do we translate those diagnoses into a meaningful diagnosis for families, so how we can make sure that we know more about what might happen, what the prognosis of those conditions are, how we can put in place good care pathways for those families where there often isn't a treatment. So I think it's been great, and I think we've always argued very hard about the benefit to families about diagnosis, even when there isn't necessarily a treatment available. But I think the next big piece of work is about how do we translate that really great increase in diagnostic rate into something meaningful day to day for families.
Almost there. You answered this to an extent already with your last question about where you personally see the field of personalised medicine heading in the next decade and what you think the biggest hurdles would be. But how will people like you at Unique help to overcome these barriers?
So I think there are several barriers. I mean, I think the idea that the diagnostic bit is getting better is really good. And as I mentioned before, I think then it needs to translate into better care management pathways for families. But I think it's now become a data issue, and we've got all of this genetic data. And I think one of the things that we do at Unique is we collect that genetic data. So when families join us, we register them, and we have a database of all of our families, and we collect not only the genetic information, but we collect very detailed phenotype information. So all of the medical concerns, how they're getting on at school, you know, whether they struggle to make friends, all of that sort of thing. And I think one of the things that we do on a small scale here is what needs to be done on a much bigger scale. And it's that sort of really deep phenotype looking and equating the genetics to the phenotype, and then trying to map out how we might care for these children and these families better. So I think it's sort of moved in the time I've been with Unique to sort of from being a sort of technology about diagnostics to being this enormous data problem, and how do we deal with all of the data we've got. And I think a lot of it's about sharing data across the world, because with rare diseases you need to collect the data from lots of places and compare the data. And so I think one of the things that we do at Unique, as well as generally get involved in research, is that we try to raise awareness of all of these issues, and we are trying to help in any way we can to facilitate that data interpretation and sharing, and getting it from being in a computer to being into the real world, so that it can make positive impact for families. And so we get involved in all sorts of research projects and sit on a number of boards. And so, for example, one of the initiatives which is really fantastic in tying up the genetics and the phenotypes is the Decipher database. And so we've always been really involved in Decipher, and we continue to be. And so we just really want to offer our support and any help we can, and to make sure that all of those initiatives can continue and work to the best that they can.
Great. So then, what can we do to support Unique as a charity?
I think what everybody can do who works in academia, research and professionals is to just continue to support us and raise awareness that we're here. And we always just want to make sure that families, when they get a diagnosis, know where they can go for information and support. And we're really conscious that not all families would want to join a support group. It's not for everyone. And so we want to make sure that our information is available for anybody who needs it, whether they join or not. So everything is published on our website. And I think that's one thing that I think is really helpful for researchers and doctors to know, is that there is this resource. We have this resource, and it's available for you guys to use, because I think there's no point in having all this information if we don't share it, which is one of the reasons we have a really big translation project, because we're really keen that once the information's been produced, that it's available in lots of different languages, so that it can help as many people as possible. Because what we really want is for people not to feel lost and alone and not know where to go for information and help.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so amazed by the work that Unique is doing, and anything that we can do to help, obviously we will. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's really kind.